Your hand hovers over the send button. Nothing has happened yet. So why does something in your chest pull tight, like a fist closing around nothing? You call that a gut feeling. You trust it more than you'd ever admit. But what if it isn't a feeling at all? What if it's information, arriving faster than thought? In 1982, a man walked into a hospital with a tumor sitting behind his forehead. When he walked out, his mind tested as sharp as it had ever been. But something else was gone. Something you're using right now, in this exact moment, without noticing it at all. What would you lose if it disappeared and left everything else intact? His name, used in the case literature, was Elliot. Before the surgery, Elliot was sharp, steady, the kind of man colleagues asked for advice. Surgeons removed the tumor cleanly, along with a small margin of tissue around it. Afterward, his IQ tested as high as ever. His memory intact. His logic untouched. Every formal test came back normal, some of it better than normal. On paper, what could possibly have gone wrong? Then his life started coming apart, one decision at a time. He'd sit at his desk for an entire afternoon, deciding whether to file a single document by date or by subject. Not because the choice was hard. Because nothing inside him ever tipped the scale. He could list every argument for either option, in perfect order for hours. What he couldn't do was feel any one of them matter more than the rest. Remember that tightening in your chest from a moment ago? The one that showed up before you had a reason ready? Elliot's never arrived. Not once. Not for the filing. Not for the bad business deal that anyone standing next to him could see coming from across the room. He could out-argue you on the pros and cons, point by point. He just couldn't feel a single one of the cons. What good is being right about everything, if nothing about being right ever moves you? Neurologist Antonio Damasio studied Elliot for years and wrote about him in a book called Descartes' Error. Damasio's question was simple and unsettling. If the logic was untouched, what exactly had Elliot lost? The answer overturned a few centuries of assumption about what a mind actually is. You've probably absorbed, without ever being taught it outright, a picture of decision-making as a courtroom. Evidence comes in. Reason weighs it. Emotion is the unruly juror who has to be kept quiet so the verdict stays clean. Descartes gave that picture its clearest version. Mind on one side reasoning cleanly, body and feeling on the other, mostly just getting in the way. But what if the juror was never the problem? What if the juror was the only one in the room actually paying attention? Elliot is the proof that the courtroom picture is wrong. Picture something as simple as a compass needle. Damasio's theory is called the somatic marker hypothesis. Somatic just means bodily. And the idea is that every option you weigh gets its own small nudge on that needle, instantly, mostly beneath your notice. A pull toward, a pull away, built from everything your body has already learned about outcomes like this one. That nudge isn't decoration sitting on top of the decision. It's the shortcut that narrows an impossible field of options down to a short list actually worth reasoning about. Elliot's surgery didn't touch his reasoning. It touched the wiring between the part of his brain that reasons and the part of his body that feels. The needle stopped moving. So every option sat in front of him weightless and infinite, because nothing ever nudged one to matter more than another. Sit with that for a second. Not. He felt too little. He felt nothing that mattered. At the exact moment feeling was supposed to matter most. Logic without a body underneath it doesn't produce a sharper mind. It produces paralysis. Isn't that the opposite of what you'd expect losing your emotions to do? Think about how many decisions you make today without ever consciously running the numbers. Which route home? Whether to answer the phone. Whether to trust the stranger holding the door open a beat too long. If you had to reason through even a fraction of those the way Elliot was forced to reason through all of his, weighing every factor explicitly, with nothing ever tipping the scale, would you even make it out the front door? Most of your day runs on a needle you never notice moving. Damasio and his colleague Antoine Becquerel tested this directly, with a card game called the Iowa Gambling Task. 4 decks on the table. 2 feel fine in the short term and ruin you in the long run. 2 feel worse up front but pay off over time. Healthy players showed a measurable stress response, a spike in the sweat on their skin, before the bad decks, often before they could say out loud which decks were bad. Their body knew first. Patients with Elliot's kind of damage never showed that spike. They kept drawing from the ruinous decks, calmly, reasonably, all the way down. What does it say that the body can be more honest than the mind it's carrying? One idea like this lands here every week, a mechanism from a mind, a machine, or a tradition, all circling the same strange place. Stay for where this one goes. Here's where this stops being a story about one man's rare injury and starts being about something running everywhere around you right now. An AI model making a decision has no hand hovering over anything, no shoulders that pull back, no stomach that drops. It has weights and outputs, and a number telling it how well it's doing against whatever it was trained to optimize. Ask a large language model something it doesn't actually know, and it will often hand you a confident, detailed, entirely invented answer, not because it's lying the way you'd lie, but because nothing in the system flinches. Where your chest would tighten, there's nothing. Where your stomach would drop, there's nothing. The words arrive with the exact same smooth confidence whether they're true or fabricated, because confidence was never wired to a felt stake in being wrong. That's not a coincidence of phrasing. That's Elliot's shape, worn by a different kind of mind. Perfect fluency, no needle, no bodily stake in the outcome, producing its answer calmly, evenly, all the way into being catastrophically wrong, and never once feeling the difference. What would it take for a system like that to actually hesitate? You don't have that problem. Not yet, not unless something goes wrong the way it went wrong for Elliot. You have a body that keeps score whether you ask it to or not. But you also live in a culture that has spent centuries telling you to overrule it. Be rational. Don't let your emotions decide. Trust the data, not the vibe. Sleep on it and let your head win, not your gut. Every one of those instructions assumes the courtroom picture. That feeling is noise sitting on top of a cleaner signal, something to filter out on the way to the real answer. Damasio's finding says the opposite. The feeling isn't sitting on top of the signal. It is the signal, arriving first, faster than you can put a reason to it, and by the time you've built a tidy explanation for a choice, the needle has usually already made most of the decision for you. The explanation often just makes the feeling sound reasonable after the fact. So when was the last time you actually decided something, instead of just narrating a decision that had already been made? This doesn't mean every gut reaction is correct. Bodies get miscalibrated too. A panic response trained by one bad experience can flag something safe as dangerous, or wave something dangerous through as familiar, off a pattern that stopped being true years ago. The point isn't that the body is infallible. It's that a mind without it isn't more rational. It's incomplete. Reasoning needs something to reason toward, some sense of which options are even worth weighing, and that sense has always been supplied quietly, underneath conscious thought, long before the language of logic gets involved. There's a strand of Buddhist practice that circles something close to this from a completely different direction, not as neuroscience, but as attention. Sit for a moment the way a practitioner might, hand resting still, shoulders settled, nothing hovering over anything. The Satipatthana Sutta describes Kayanupassana, contemplation of the body, as one of the earliest foundations of mindfulness, not thinking about the body from a distance, but staying with what's actually happening inside it, the same tightening, the same drop, the same pull, watched closely instead of rushed past. Different vocabulary, same claim underneath. The body is already reporting something, and most of what you call thinking happens after it, not instead of it. What might you notice if you actually waited for the feeling instead of reaching straight for the reason? Elliot spent the rest of his working life unable to hold steady employment. His marriage ended. Colleagues who once asked him for advice eventually stopped calling. Not because he stopped being intelligent. By every test that exists, he never did. Because intelligence was never, on its own, the thing carrying his life forward. The needle was. And once it stopped moving, there was nothing underneath the logic to catch him. Here's the part worth sitting with a little longer than feels comfortable. You don't get to opt out of this system just because it's fallible. There's no upgrade path to Elliot's kind of pure logic that would leave you better off. The full removal of feeling from decision-making isn't freedom from bias. It's a man deciding for hours whether to file a piece of paper under one heading or another, calmly, reasonably, while his actual life quietly came apart around him, and never once feeling it happen. That's the quiet horror sitting underneath Elliot's case, and underneath every system built to reason without a body. The logic never fails. It runs clean, defensible at every step, straight past the edge, because nothing was ever wired in to feel the drop coming before it arrives. Reassurance, if there's any here, is this: your flinch is not a flaw in you. It isn't noise sitting on top of your real thinking, waiting to be managed or reasoned away. For most of your life, before you ever had a reason ready, it was the thinking, faster, older, and closer to right than you've been taught to believe. Rest there a moment. A hand flat and still against a closed door. Nothing hovering. Nothing yet decided. But sit with Elliot a little longer before you let that comfort you completely. Your hand hovers over the send button. Nothing has happened yet. And still, something in your chest pulls tight, like a fist closing around nothing. Elliot lost the ability to feel that. Nothing about him ever looked broken. And it cost him everything his logic was never built, on its own, to protect.